Welcome to Slice Property Made Possible. This season is powered by New Zealand Home Loans, local mortgage mentors who have been helping Kiwis achieve their financial goals for 27 years with proven results. The thing I love about NZHL is the mortgages are tailored for you with ongoing personalised service, coaching and tools to put you in control. It doesn't end with buying your property, they continue to help you pay down any loans and build your wealth, which can't be said about all advisors. This season, we will be playfully roasting everyday buyers and experts so you can learn from our mistakes. Head to today's episode notes to get access to our free home buyers software and your very own NZHL advisor. Welcome to the show, Sasha. Thank you for joining us. I'm super excited to jump into your first home journey. Do you want to share a little bit about what that looked like for you?
Yeah, I was 19 in the UK, and at the time there were lots of one-bedroom houses being built, and you were essentially being paid to move into a house that offer you a 105% mortgage.
That's something I can get behind. Yeah, so 105% mortgage. So do you want to break that down a little bit more?
Yeah, so they would essentially pay all of your legal fees as well. So you'd move in, and now I know that I owed more than the house was ever worth. But at the time, I was oblivious because I was so excited about owning my own home.
Yeah, okay. So they just gave you all the money to go do it.
Yeah.
But, you know, at a cost.
At a cost.
Down the line. And what was your financial knowledge like at the time? Because I think this is really interesting to think about now what you're doing with your business to maybe where it all started.
Yeah. So I was a trainee accountant and a university dropout. So I think I probably thought I knew it all, but I didn't know anything. I was completely oblivious. And that meant that I was oblivious to what things could go wrong as well. Whereas now, 25 years later, I'm like, oh, good God, how lucky was I that things didn't go wrong.
When we're young, things are left a little bit up to chance.
Yeah.
We spoke on the phone about you making an offer and not actually getting pre-approval for that property at the time.
Sounds like mad, right?
It does sound a bit mad, yeah. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, so in the UK, way back then, it was a really simple maths calculation, what you could borrow. It was your income times 2.5 times, sorry.
Or so you thought.
Also, I thought.
Yeah.
So that's just what I did. And I went, the maths, there's the calculator. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
And I think where I'm from is a place called Stafford in the middle of England, and most people own a house because the houses are quite cheap.
Yeah.
So it never felt like a thing that could be a no, because we were earning similar to most people that we were mates with. It just didn't feel unlikely.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess that is kind of still how people look at it today. But that's dangerous because there's not always a shared understanding of actually what your mate's finances look like, or, what.
Completely.
Yeah, so then you're thinking, oh, well, they did it, so we probably can, so we'll go for something in that range. Like, it's obviously not the way to do it. No. And not having pre-approval, people just still do that sometimes, but, you should at least speak to a bank, Sasha.
Yes, you should do a lot more than speak to a bank. Especially, I think one of the things that I've reflected on it is I assumed that the bank knew better than me about what I could afford. When actually you've got to think about what life you want to live.
Is this the second property that you bought when you went through?
Yeah, I guess kind of it's the thing I've learned since that I wish I'd known then.
Yeah.
Because I remember moving into the first home and we were sat on Christmas and maxed out on our overdraft, and we'd just got used to paying the mortgage, and I hadn't quite figured out that we couldn't afford it. And it sounds really stupid now, like, for God's sake, I'm an accountant. But we put more trust in the bank knowing what we could afford than we did.
Yeah, so you just basically went, oh, well, we got given this lending, so therefore we can afford it, as opposed to, this is what we spend on XYZ, this is what we need for, these expenses. Yeah. You just went, oh, well, they gave us this, so it must be fine.
Yeah, completely. And to be honest, the second home, which was in Northcote, that I bought on my own as well, even though I'm, was running a finance company and an accountant, I think maybe one of my core beliefs about money is that I'll always find a way. And that sometimes leads me to still
take
slightly more risk, or assume that I'll find a way.
Which it's, in a way, it's nice to have, a more growth mindset in that sense. But obviously it is super risky, and it means that you can put yourself in situations that perhaps you can't find the money.
Yeah, so what happened with the second house is I had to find a flatmate. That was a condition of my mortgage. So I'd found the house, I'd put an offer in, and then we were scrambling trying to find, because I was still buying it on my own, how to make the numbers work. And the how was I needed a letter from somebody that was going to move in, that was going to pay this much rent, and then I could settle.
When you did settle, did you have to get that flatmate in as well? Yeah. So you had to actually find that person to help,
Yeah, I actually got my ex-husband to move in.
Oh my goodness.
We're just like, find a friend.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. I guess that's where that mindset comes together with the reality of executing on it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how was that living with your ex when...
Well, we've got a son together, so it was actually quite handy for him.
Oh, yeah. So he had that time, yeah.
We were on the top floor. So, it didn't last very long, but it was enough to just get the deal over the line.
Make things work for a bit until you... Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, interesting. I don't know that I would purchase a property on the contingency that my ex had to live there to make it work. But, that's...
I'm not always logical.
Yeah, crafty though.
Very crafty.
The first property was a tiny home. Did you want to share a little bit about what it actually was like, what due diligence you did, if any?
Yeah, so it was a small one-bedroom house, kind of actually one living room, tiny kitchen on the ground floor, and then one bedroom at the top and a bathroom. That's all it was.
Yeah.
So 2 up, 2 down. And it was a new development built on a floodplain.
Oh.
Yeah, I know. And now I'm like, oh, maybe I should have looked at that.
It's time for a segment we're calling Roast My Home Hunt. It's time to roast, don't take it to heart. When we learn from your mistakes, we all get smart.
But I just assumed that if they're building like hundreds of houses, that people smarter than me would have sorted out that, it floats or something. That there was,
It floats.
I know, I sound ridiculous.
You bought a house on the premise that they probably think that it floats. It floats. It's a houseboat.
There was something that must have happened engineering-wise. I assumed that, we're not having the house.
My partner's an engineer, so...
My second husband is
Oh,
too.
there you go. That's probably why you found him, because you're like, I probably
Blind spot.
I need some help in this department here.
Yeah. So I because there was a big development and lots of people had bought the houses, again, I was 19, so I put lots of trust in people knowing better than me. And I think now I've learned that that's really not the right way to go.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of, yes, you need the right partners, but you also need to do your own work and take ownership of that. The Slice platform actually drills down exactly what those tasks and activities are. So if you are looking again in future, you can always follow that checklist.
Do better.
Yeah, do better. Well, the floodplain thing's interesting. Like, I know it was a while ago that you bought that, but still, if it's on a floodplain, it's on a floodplain. It doesn't have to be that. Now we've come a massive way with climate change, and we know the risks of that with the flooding that's happened in New Zealand over the last couple of years, where it's a very real risk here and across the world. But I think even at the time, it's like, if there's a bunch of rainfall and it just floods slightly, like, that's not ideal for the weather tightness of the property and the property not being damaged. When you were there, was there any issues with dampness or weather related?
We had a really small lawn at the back, and that would get flooded, so it became like a mud pit. But nothing structural. And those houses, I went back last year to the UK and drove past the house, and it's still there.
Yeah.
It's still standing. The entire estate is still standing. But it was definitely a risk, and it's something that my family who still live around there, they still comment on. I wonder when it's going to go wrong. That's how they feel.
Yeah. And it's like a game of hot potato. It's like, I've bought this property, but... how long will I have it for? Or will I sell it in time to not be impacted by that? Because I guess, you're actually seeing the risk if it's flooding in the backyard. It's like you're just waiting for one really bad storm to push that water into the house.
It's like I've got a friend in Northcote, and when all of the floods happened last year, half of her back garden just fell because it was on the, and she didn't know that was going to happen. It was never a, So
no, sometimes you can't know. But if you're on a floodplain, you can know, Sasha.
Yes, okay, Amy, got it.
No, but it's about looking at that limb though, right? In New Zealand, it's a land information memorandum, and that has that kind of detail. It is interesting though, because there's a lot of people in New Zealand that do buy those properties and did buy those properties even though they had those risks highlighted. So, we're trying to take that lesson and help others learn from that and go, well, hang on, is that a risk that I actually do want to take on if I think, that actually might be the outcome.
Especially if it's your biggest investment that you're going to make, right?
Yeah, totally.
Change your life completely. If that house ends up, in the sea, broken, you can't live in it, then your entire financial life forever will be changed. Yeah.
Speaking about your financial life, I know you've got an amazing company that is doing things that I think could be really interesting for our audience as well, for some of those that are starting on that home ownership journey and trying to get a hold on their finances, so that they can go to the bank and get pre-approval, but also so that they can get an understanding of what they can afford, Sasha. So do you want to share a little bit about what it is you're doing with Money Sweetspot?
Yeah, so Money Sweetspot is the only lender that helps you out of debt. So what we do is we bundle up lots of consumer debt. So if you're going for a pre-approval, you might want to tidy up your finances, look at where your money is going, and present yourself in the best view possible for that bank, so you can understand the kind of property that you can buy.
On that note, that's where it's really great to work with a broker, and that's why we provide brokers as partners, because you've got time to actually put that case together, rather than sending your information to the bank and them going, oh no, that's not very tidy. Yeah. And this sounds like an element that helps there as well, with actually just getting your debts and things looking as the banks would want them to look.
Yeah, and that's what we have helped with people with over the last kind of 18 months, is working with their broker and them to look at the debt that they're in and what place do they want to be in when they want to buy, or just by tidying it up now, could that mean that they can get a pre-approval now?
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what that can
be. And sometimes there's a balance of actually how much debt do we pay down versus how much do we have for our deposit, but it's kind of that tango and getting the support through that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what kind of challenges has the company seen as well over the last year or so? Because obviously there's been a bit of a tightening environment with people struggling more and more and potentially moving into more debt, or potentially having debt that's moved on to different interest rates. How has Money Sweetspot been supporting, and what have you been seeing in that regard?
Yeah, it's probably been the hardest year I've seen in 20 years in financial services. Sounds a bit depressing, right?
It does, yeah.
It does, I'm sorry. But so what we've seen is more people keeping credit cards for a really long time at that kind of 30% interest and only ever paying the minimum. And then that just becomes like you're paying rent to your credit card, because you never really get rid of it. It just sits there like a dirty secret that you forget about. So that means that more people are then maxing out multiple facilities, like they might have a credit card. People are using buy now, pay later a lot to live. That's been pretty awful to see. And
buy now, pay later is one of those things the banks don't want to see when you're going for pre-approval as well. So these people might be obviously further away from that goal as well, because they're struggling. But
yeah, I mean, I think that's maybe one of the assumptions. In the last year, lots of people have been struggling. The people that we help are mainly working, renting, a couple. It's not people on the super low income that are financially distressed. We're seeing more and more people juggling and struggling that, you'd assume a few years ago would have been absolutely fine.
And if they can get it right, then they can, move forward and start investing rather than struggling.
Yeah, I mean, I think on a more positive note, I would say that in the last year, people have been more motivated to sort it out. And knowing that there are options out there like Sweetspot and others to kind of go, actually, I can reset this. I am going to take charge, a bit like you were talking about, when you're doing your due diligence on a home and figuring out what risks are there. Well, actually, I can take charge of my own finances and sort myself out.
Yeah.
So I have seen that that's been really positive. We helped one guy in his late 20s get into his first home in the last year.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. So he tidied up his debt. He was meant to be in debt for another 4 years, but he smashed it out of the park, got a second job, moved back in with the folks because he was motivated about getting into that first home.
Yeah.
And he did completely, sort it out.
And sometimes actually having an exciting goal is a better way to look at it, rather than I'm actually going to pay down my debt. Yeah. That's not that fun. No. But if you go, I'm going to pay down my debt so that I can invest in shares, or so that I can buy my first home, so that I can reach a goal. I feel like that's a really exciting way to look at it. And it's probably what motivated, I imagine, that guy to make such drastic changes.
Yeah, and that's what we do with all of our customers. The goal is why?
Yeah.
Why do you want this reset? What is the motivation? Is it that you want to go see your family that are overseas? Is it that you want to be able to invest in your future? Is it that you want to get into a first home? So anchoring on the why, not being like, oh, this debt that I've had
Because the
forever.
what's boring. Yeah.
Yeah, the what's really boring. It's like money that I'm just going to like have to pay off. But like, you know, like set yourself some goals and imagine a future.
Yeah.
Imagine when it, like, what is it? And that's what we keep, you know, hammering with our customers. It's like, what's that?
And I think that's amazing to hear, and it makes so much sense to me. I think creating a big goal as well can just shift your whole mindset and make it open and kind of, yeah, I guess it just, your actions kind of come out of that why, right, and are motivated by that. So I feel like if someone was thinking, oh, I'm 20 years away from buying a house, but then you just go, don't worry about the time period, just go, I want to buy a house, this is how I'm going to buy my first home. It becomes very exciting all of a sudden, and then you can work out those actions, and it might be that they're willing to make bigger sacrifices than they first thought.
Yeah, and breaking it down into those little steps and those little baby steps and celebrating the wins along the way. Like that's what we do is, you know, every 3 months, look at how far you've come, look how much interest you've saved, look how we focus on the debt-free date. And then we show that actually by what you're doing every day, you're getting out of debt faster. So for us, if our customers do financial education, they get points that gives them money off their loan that gets them out of debt faster. So we're increasing that financial education level and helping them out of debt or into their first home.
And it's like a game.
It's a game, yeah.
It sort of sounds like that. I'm like, oh yeah, and I get more of that. Points, I'm winning.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's really interesting around that as well is the strategies that you're kind of talking about, like debt-free day. You mentioned that. Like what sort of strategies do you see work really well for your customers at Money Sweetspot?
Yeah, having a goal, a debt-free date.
Yeah.
Breaking it down and celebrating the progress along the way.
Yeah.
And not being too hard on yourself when unpredictable things happen. So don't beat yourself up just because
your car broke down and now you've got to pay. Yeah.
Like that's always going to happen. Life's going to happen. It's going to be unpredictable. Focus on the progress you're making. You know, it's not going to be linear. And if it goes up and down, who cares? Just keep going.
But so amazing what you're doing to support people out of debt, because I know it's not. Yeah, it's not the exciting kind of experience that people want to get involved in, but ultimately it's the biggest kind of stepping stone into first home ownership and into investing in anything or your financial well-being, really. And a lot of us do start with a bit of debt. That's almost the Kiwi way. It's sad to say it, but you know, the first thing that the majority of Kiwis do is go to university, get a student loan, and then just find themselves in 50 grand, 60 grand, 70 grand of debt. So it's not like we are a country that's afraid of debt. Do you think that the UK has like different money behaviours or financial views? Like what's your experience been between those two countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think in the UK, you get a mortgage and you keep it until you've paid it off. It's a slightly different mindset there. My friends and family in the UK have probably got less risk appetite. So they'll probably find a house and stay in it a lot longer. I think the research, was it that we stay in a house 5 or 6 years here?
Yeah, we move a lot more.
Oh my God, my family don't move at all. Like they just find the house and stay in it. But I think in the UK, you're more likely to get into debt for a car than you are here in my experience. So that car debt when you're 18, that's the first debt you get into rather than the student loan. Not many people go to uni and you get a car loan as soon as you get out of school.
Interesting. Is that a status thing?
Yeah, it's a status thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. Definitely. I'm just thinking about my dad now. Like my dad's a bus driver. And even though we never really had any money, he would always try and find the nicest car he could possibly have. Even though, and that was more important than,
the house or like,
more important than the house. My dad lives in a state house now. So more important than the house.
Yeah, interesting. I think that's something that even in Australia, I hate to call them out, but I see a lot of cars like, it's not an investment, obviously, a car. It's not even, I know that some people count it as an asset, but as soon as you buy it, it's costing you money, and the resale generally isn't going to be better than, except for COVID times. I think sometimes there was a shortage of vehicles here, but generally resale is not going to be as good, so it's a liability. Whereas a house, generally, if you hold on to it for long enough, is going to be, there's some debate around the family home and whether or not that actually is an investment, but generally when you go to sell it, you're going to make more on it, provided you hold it for long enough time. So it's just interesting to hear so many people in different countries do that car thing. I don't think it's as common in New Zealand.
I was talking to my team yesterday because alongside buying the first home and having that mortgage, at the same time I got a car loan. So I was a 19-year-old with a car loan for this pink.
Hey, you were in the UK. That was what they were doing.
I was like, yeah, and so I'm really not perfect, because when I bought the second home in Northcote, at the same time I'd met the engineer's second husband, and we've got 3 shared kids. And there was this real visceral feeling that I needed to get a bigger car to make sure that we were all right. So I repeated a pattern 20 years later that I still bought a car on finance, even though I'd just gone into this. So I think the reason I'm sharing all of that is, like, I'm not perfect, and I still make mistakes. And it's because money's not rational. It's based on emotion.
It is emotional.
And that's only, 7 years ago.
And it's also required to fund your lifestyle. So to be fair, if you need a bigger car because you have kids to put in it, I'm not saying don't get finance. I'm just saying that I think there's a lot of people out there that are purchasing fancy cars to keep up with the Kardashians. I was like, it used to be keeping up with the Joneses, and I was like, rebrand. But it's also just great hearing your lessons so that, they can become someone else's learnings. They don't have to just be your learnings. They can, maybe someone can skip a lesson and move ahead. So I appreciate you sharing that. But now that you're kind of moving into money's sweet spot, has that changed the way that you'd make some financial decisions? Would you buy a car on finance today?
I've seen 4,400 money stories in the last 18 months through Money Sweet Spot. Yeah, so it's definitely changed how I view money and debt. And I started Sweet Spot because I was sick of people being judged and excluded and, those horrible interest rates. So I started it. It's a social lender, so wanting to do better by people. But then seeing these 4,400 stories of really challenging situations, it kind of feels really horrific to be like, oh, I'd just go and get a car loan for the car, because I think that the families that we've been helping have needed the car loan, but they've been paying like 35% interest on that car loan, but they were trying to get to work. And I just see the harm that that's done. It's really heartbreaking, and especially when people are working so hard. We've got people working 2 jobs just to try and pay the rent and the bills. It's just been a really difficult. Yeah, so with these families, seeing the challenges and how tight things are for so many New Zealanders, and I've only seen 4,400, and we've got, 5.5 million here. Like, it's definitely changed my thoughts, and it makes me really annoyed when people talk about, people are just wasting their money and they're just buying all of the things. They're not. New Zealanders every day at the moment are just doing their very best and working really bloody hard. So now I think it's about being careful around how we assume people are with money.
And it's education as well, I think. It's that people are, falling into that trap of thinking, but, my friends bought a car on finance, so maybe I'll just do that too. Like, they seem to be okay, not knowing actually what their financial situation's like. So transparency around having those conversations, those tough conversations, and education around actually what it means to get a car loan versus what it means to get a home loan versus what it means to take out a credit card or top up your home loan. Like, there's different debt, and some of that debt is good debt and some of that debt is bad debt.
Yeah, and when people are desperate or really challenged, you might Google find me a loan.
It takes you straight to the bad debt.
That is going to potentially screw you over. So don't always go to the top of the Google link and get into that debt, because it could be at 50% interest.
Yeah, I actually think, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this, but I actually think going to the bank is not a bad idea. I know it seems scary to go to the bank sometimes, but they actually are going to have the more median rates, and they're at least going to have a conversation with you and potentially be able to support you before you go to, a second tier lender or go to a money sweet spot or some sort of organisation that can actually help guide you in the right direction before you take out the wrong debt. That's obviously preventative, but then there's, once you've got that debt as well, how you can work through that, which is obviously where you come in as well.
Yeah, I think that the first thing I'd ask anybody to do is to look at what their credit score is, because there might be stuff on there that you've got no idea is on there. So many people will look at their credit report and say, did you know? And it's really small balances of phone debt, or when people buy a phone on a contract, forget that and stop paying it because they changed provider. So that's why, go do that so you don't get a horrible surprise when you're trying to get your home.
What would be your final tips for, people that are moving into the first home buyer space and wanting to purchase property?
Think about the life you want to live with the property. So really, don't set yourself up so that your life's miserable and you've got a house, but you're living off water and porridge.
Yeah.
Don't compare yourself to others. Your journey is yours, so we don't talk about money often enough, so you won't really know what's going on. My third thing would be, when I think about the houses that I've bought, it's two things. The first is a place that you enjoy to live, and the second thing is your first home isn't always your forever home. So buy a home that is good enough for now. It doesn't need to be good enough forever.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, I've got our final question for you, Sasha, which is, if that first home or the current home you choose had a doorbell and that doorbell played a theme song, what song would it play?
You're Welcome from Moana.
Oh, what a banger. I love Moana. I love Disney as well. I went to the drag show Kalutsi, and it's Disney theme at the moment. I went for a hen's do on K Road.
Fun.
Thank you so much for joining us, Sasha.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining our community. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve our podcast for you. We really appreciate it. Check out the links in today's episode notes to get access to our free resources and your own NZ Home Loans financial advisor. On that note, a quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide financial advice as we're not taking into account your personal circumstances. However, when you join our platform, we have a team of partners like New Zealand Home Loans ready to provide you with financial advice free of charge.